Discipleship. We started out about 3 weeks ago talking about this, and we talked about, and we have some guests here, so we have to fill them in here. One of the things that we started out with was the idea that if we are a Christian, we are a disciple. And if we are a disciple, we are a Christian. And all it really means is the kids were right, people who are committed to and follow Jesus Christ. That's the simple definition. That's the simple way to think about this. And really, this week in my life, it's even gotten more simple, if it can do that. And so I want to give you 3 sentences that I can almost guarantee you'll be able to remember at least until noon. And maybe even till 6. And so to help you remember it until tomorrow, I'm going to have you do some things with the sentence like we almost always do. The act of following Jesus is discipleship. So therefore, we need to ask ourselves, what does that mean? And so here's what that means. Repeat after me. Loving like Jesus loved. Now that was pretty simple, wasn't it? The best part is most of these words repeat themselves. So the first is loving like Jesus loved.
Loving like Jesus loved.
The second is serving like Jesus served.
Serving like Jesus served.
And the third is sharing like Jesus shared.
Sharing like Jesus shared.
So in the world of disciples, we are about loving, sharing, serving, and sharing like Jesus. That's pretty simple, right? How many of you can remember that till tomorrow at least? How many of you would like me to send an email reminder? Ultimately, it comes down to one really, really, really simple sentence. Discipleship is being like Jesus. If you can remember that as your goal, you will remember that it is about loving, about serving, and about sharing. Sheila and I had a great opportunity on Friday night. I will tell you, the preacher and his wife have had an exceedingly busy weekend. Some of it is our own fault because both of us tend to be just a little guilty of trying to find one more thing to do to make our lives more complicated. Any of you ever guilty of that in this room? I don't know how to take the laugh back there, but one more thing. That's what I call it in our house. So on Wednesday, I think it was, I got a call from a friend of mine that lives in Plano saying, would you like to come to dinner with us Friday night? Well, we love this couple. And I've known this couple a long time, and we're always kind of looking for ways to get together. And, you know, they live way up in some far, almost to Oklahoma, Plano. Amen. And we live in Duncanville. But they are active in a group called Cru, which is the college ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ now. And they are attached to it because their daughter has been moved by it and is part of it at her college. And so they support it, and I am sure that, it was a fundraiser, and so Russell had bought a table. And he had people cancel, so he calls us. I don't know if he had people cancel. Yes, he did. His brother canceled. I forgot. And so we knew that we had JJ and Bridgen's wedding rehearsal, but it was at 4, so we could make it all happen. And Traffic was beautiful. We got in the car, we put the top down, we drove to Bentwood Country Club. It was pretty ritzy. And we had a great time. And we went, and there we got to hear about what Campus Crusade crew was doing in the Dallas area. And I'll be honest, I didn't know if they were doing anything in the Dallas area, but they are on 4 major college campuses here. And they are touching people's lives, and they are talking about Jesus with college students. Now, I don't know about you, but college students isn't who I think first of when I think about talking to people about Jesus, but this group does. And it's all they do. And they go in, and it's student-led. And they have a really simple process for what they do. And here's what they do. They win people to Jesus, they grow people in faith, and they go tell the story. That's called discipleship. So we went and heard about how they were growing disciples in the 18 to 25-year-old age group. One disciple at a time. And I will tell you, it's not cheap. But it wasn't nearly as expensive as I thought they were going to report. Discipleship, if I listen to Tim, the speaker, correctly, is about being a student. In fact, when Jesus called the disciples, he called them as a rabbi, and he said, "Come, follow me, and I will teach you how to be fishers of men." So as disciples, which includes everyone who thinks they are a Christian, which is all of us in this room for the most part, I think, are students. So what are we students of? Well, the easiest way to explain this is, first, we study Jesus. Seems right, doesn't it? Study Jesus. But the problem is, most of us, when it comes to studying Jesus, tend to study about Jesus. Now, let's pretend for a minute you're going to study the person next to you, or in front of you, or behind you. Pick somebody to study. You may not want to deal with the person sitting next to you. There are 2 ways to do that. The first is to study about them, to go online and Google their name. Everything's right on Google, but you can find out a lot on Google. And then you might even dig deeper, and you might even, one way is to ask people. So if I wanted to know about Jeff, I could ask Peggy, and she'd tell me everything I ever wanted to know about Jeff. Now, it may not be everything Jeff wants me to know about Jeff, but we'll work that out. Don't tell him everything. Now, the problem is, how good of studying is that? It's nice. It's easy. It's easier to study about someone or something. But to really follow Jesus, we need to go beyond the about Jesus and study Jesus. Because if we watch Jesus, if we listen to Jesus, if we follow Jesus, you see, that's how Jesus taught them to be fishers of men. He said, "Come, follow me." It wasn't, "Look at me from over there." It was, "Come, follow me." And what did they do when they followed Jesus? Well, let me tell you what they did. They loved like Jesus. They served like. They shared like. They were like Jesus. You see, when we really want to study Jesus, it's not just the about, but it's the essence. Who is he? Now, that's just where we start. You see, I had Glenn read Mark chapter 3, verses 13 through 19, and we didn't ask any kids to read that because it was filled with names. And, but you all knew those names, right? Glenn said Jesus called, the 12 disciples. They were all the people that Jesus had chosen. And I have to tell you, in Sunday school, we talked about this group and we said, they wouldn't be at the top of our list. There were people in there that were traitors. There were people in there that handled dead, smelly, icky fish. There were people who were unclean. There was a tax collector, and that's this weekend. If you haven't finished your taxes, tomorrow's the day. Aren't you glad I reminded you? These are not the people that most of us would choose to have follow us. But they are the people Jesus chose. They are the people that Jesus looked at their hearts and their minds and their skills and said, these are the people that I need to follow me. And then we read from Romans chapter 12, and I love Romans chapter 12 because it helps us understand that there are some things about discipleship we need to know. First and foremost, he says, brothers and sisters, I urge you, first and foremost, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Being a disciple means being a sacrifice. We have to sacrifice our lives to the cause of Jesus. That means it's not cheap. It means we have to think about what we're doing. It means we have to watch how we're living life and what we're doing and how it affects people and what difference it makes. There's a cost. There's a sacrifice that we're all called to make. When we make a sacrifice for Jesus, it is about who we are for Jesus. Jesus says, lay down your whole life, not just part of it. Jesus says, I want all of you, not just a piece. And he says, but you're gonna be special when you do that. Because everybody who lays down their life, everybody who makes this sacrifice for Jesus gets blessed with some gifts, he said. Some of you are going to be prophets and prophesy the good news. And some of you are going to be teachers and encouragers. And some of you are going to be leaders and teachers. And some of you are going to do other things. And if you read more of Paul, there are like 17 different gifts he identifies specifically within the church. And he says, when you make the sacrifice and you begin to live life according to your gifts, then you'll be following Jesus the way he's called you to follow him. Now that is important, because what that tells us is that not all of the disciples were the same. There was a reason they needed a tax collector. There was a reason they needed a zealot. There was a reason they needed some fishermen. You know, fishermen in Jesus' day weren't really very afraid of anything. They really weren't. They were ready to handle the hard, messy stuff of life. And isn't life hard and messy? And sometimes, it even is smelly. And I don't mean just by the sense of smell. I mean, sometimes living life, you find out things you don't want to know. Sometimes you find out things that you can't hardly believe. Sometimes you find, and none of these things are ever good, are they? Every once in a while, a good one sneaks in. But this being a disciple is not quite as easy as it sounds. This following Jesus, this being like Jesus. Because it takes sacrifice. It takes intentional building up of the body. It takes this idea of picking up your cross and following Jesus. So preparing for discipleship is a conscious decision. You're invited. You have to decide. Will you follow him or not? And then it always takes an action. When we follow Jesus, you're not going to get to sit here in your most comfortable pew that you've ever sat in. In fact, it isn't even going to matter where your name is in the pew because you're not going to be in it, really, if you're a disciple. If you're really a disciple, the only time you show up here is on Sunday morning to be fed. The rest of the time, you're out there doing what God has called you to do. So it really doesn't matter where your seat is. I laugh. I keep telling Dale Ward that we're just going to move all the pews. We're just going to move them. Let you try to figure out where yours is. Because you don't need them. You see, this idea of being a disciple, of preparing for a disciple, for preparing to be a disciple, requires you to do three things. You know, each week I've been telling you things to do. I'm going to tell you three things this week you can do. And I'm just going to lay it out here kind of like Jesus did. It's not an option. It's not an option. If you're really going to be a disciple, then you got to do some of these things. And I know we're disciples. We don't like to be told we have to do anything. Well, my friends, the disciples of Jesus, which we claim in name and desire, I believe, is about doing what Jesus does. So I'm going to challenge you, and I haven't been very good, but the first thing I want you to do is the same thing I've listed first in this list every week. And that is, if on Thursday morning at 10 o'clock you are not at work, we'd like to see you in Bible study at the other end of this building. Because disciples study Jesus. And we're doing this study in Luke, and it's about Jesus. Number two, I want you to keep praying. We publish a list in our newsletter and on our webpage of people we're praying for. We have this street ministry team going out every week. We have people working with our kids. We have all kinds of things happening around here that need your prayers. You might not be able to go feed the hungry, but you can pray for the group doing it. You might not be willing or able to go down and hand out food or come on Wednesday like Dudley does and Don does at youth group and hang out with kids and play basketball and do all the... You know, Dudley has to have back surgery, I think, because he joined the youth group. Oh, that's right. That might scare them, huh? No, he had back trouble before. But the fact of the matter is, there are people stepping up and answering calls. You know, Lee Austin has been answering calls. She's been going to take people to the doctor and working with the prayer team and working with street team, and Lori is stepping up, and people are moving things, and Cher stepped up to lead a team because we found ourselves without a team leader for this week. You know what? There are some people in this building starting to act like Jesus. And I'm going to tell you, not everybody's happy about it. And that's too bad. But we're going to keep doing it. Because Jesus said, love, serve, and share. You see, discipleship requires us to act. So study. Come to Bible study. Tell me what you're studying. If you're not coming on Thursday morning, I want to know what you're reading in the Bible. And if you need suggestions, I'll tell you. Read the Gospel of Luke, even if you're not coming to Bible study. Secondly, pray for those people on our lists and for our ministry teams. Pray for our choir and our praise team. Pray for our elders and deacons who are leading us. Pray for our board that are making decisions. Pray for our people who are going to go on walks to Emmaus, which we need to have about 7 of this in the next year. Do that. That's I've been playing with that number. That'd be the perfect number of people going to the next series of Walk to Emmauses. We need to do those things. And the third thing, and this is where the rubber meets the road, folks, when it comes to being a disciple. Because when Jesus called those people to be his disciples in Mark chapter 3, verses 13 through 19, he equipped them, and well, he didn't really equip them at that point. He said, you're going to go and preach and share the good news and tell people about me, and you're going to cast out demons, and if you read the other Gospels, you're going to heal people, and you're going to change people's lives. So today, the new assignment is to find one person. How many? One person. That's all. One person, and you're going to do it this way. Dear Lord, show me who I'm supposed to touch this week with your love. How can I serve them? How can I share your good news? It's pretty simple. How can I be like Jesus to this person that you're showing me? I already know the excuse. I don't know anybody. I have a theological word for that, baloney. I want you to find one person that you're going to pray for and in some way share the good news with. And here's where it gets complicated. And I have to tell you, my phone has buzzed twice already with people from the first service showing off. That's what I'm saying. I've had 2 people already respond to this. I want to know the person's name that God lays on your heart. So you're going to send me an email or a text saying, the person I am praying for, working with, sharing with is ... I'm not going to publish it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to pray for you to be able to talk to that person. One person. Choir, that's you too. One person that God's putting on your heart to be like Jesus with. And it may just simply to pray for them. But if God says, I want you to pray for this person, you're going to call that person. You're going to sit with that person. You're going to talk with that person. You're going to say, I have no earthly idea why, but God has said, I'm supposed to pray for you. So this week I'm praying for you. It may be to invite someone to worship. Don't invite them to church. Invite them to worship. It may be that somebody needs a meal fixed. It may be that somebody needs a loving touch of some sort from you. It may be a need for a prayer blanket. It may be, well, you get to fill in the blank because you get to be like Jesus. And there is a test. There will be a test. Because the call to discipleship has been extended to all of us. How many of you think you're ready?